Okay, today's Daf Yomi is Yevamos Daf Yevamos 38. We're going to start on the bottom of 37b, around 15 lines from the bottom, where the Gemara discusses the case of a suffix. That means this boy is born, or this child is born, and we're not sure if the child is from the deceased man, i.e., if he, let's say, is from Ruvain and he's born 9 months after Ruvain's death, or if he's from the Yavam, i.e., from Ruvain's brother Shimon, who's 7 months after Ruvain's death, and so therefore he's what's called a suffix. He's an uncertain status. So the Gemara says the following scenario: Suffix uvnei Yavam shabo lachok b'nechse Yavam v'basar depalag Yavam b'nechse Misma. So the suffix comes along to try and make a claim to the estate with the Bnei Yavam, with the offspring of the Yavam, i.e. with Shimon's certain children. And they're coming to try and divide up the estate of the Yavam, the estate of Shimon, after Shimon already took the estate of Reuven, meaning to say Reuven had died, and Shimon had come and divided up, and Shimon had divided up that estate with the suffix, because they both had an equal claim to it. And now Shimon has died, and so the suffix and the Bnei Yavam both have claims to Shimon's estate. So Bnei Yavam Amri, the Bnei Yavam say to the suffix, I see Raya Dachuna. Yeah, we'll give you a portion of our estate, but first you have to bring a proof that you are our brother, which means you can. So therefore, you get nothing. They said to him, I see Raya Dachuna to Shekol. Bring a proof that you are our brother, and then take a portion. Amar suffix. The suffix says to them, Manav Shaykh. He says, one way or the other, I'm going to get more money from this estate because if I am your brother, then give me a portion with you. And if I am the son of the deceased, when I had divided up the Reuven's estate, the deceased estate, then when I divided up that estate, how did I divide it? Your father took half because he said I wasn't your brother, I wasn't his son. But now at this point, you're saying that I'm not your brother. You're saying I'm his son. So now give me back the other half of the estate that your father took from me. It's one way or the other. So how do we look at this status? So Rabbi Abba says in the name of Rav, Kam Dina. Rabbi Abba says in the name of Rav, and once there was a decision that was established, you don't go back and look at it. And so therefore, Kam Dina, the matter has been established. And so we don't reevaluate it. And so the matter has been declared, and so it was declared that he is not able to say I have the rights to it as his son. I have the full rights to this thing. No, we made a ruling against that. Whereas Rabbi Yirmiyah says Hadar Dina. Rabbi Yirmiyah says no, you have the right to go back and relook at that case and reevaluate it. So Gemara says Lema bepukta da admon v'rabbanan kamiflagi. Let's say that this dispute between how we look at this estate between Rabbi Abba, who says Kam Dina, Rabbi Yirmiyah says Hadar Dina. Let's say that this is the same situation as the dispute between the Admon and the Rabbanan. The Tanan, because we learned Misha Allah Medina Sayam, somebody who went overseas, the Avdo Derach Sadeo, and when he went overseas, he forgot where he had an easement to his property, and now that he went overseas, he lost his easement to the property. He lost where the path was. Admon says that under those circumstances, that he knows he had an easement, he should take the shortest path. That's what they'll give him, and they have to give him a path, an easement path. The Chacham say, you know what? He has no options. They can force him to pay an exorbitant amount of money or tell him to go fly a helicopter to get to his property, since he has no claim to an easement. So Vavinamba, And so we said, Rabbanan, we challenged the rabbis, Shapir Kamar. This guy knew he had an easement to his property, so why don't they have to give him an easement? So the Anmon's argument that they have to give him an easement is correct. So Amar Rav Yehuda Marav, Hachamay Askinon. So Rav Yehuda says in the name of Rav that what we're talking about here is you're going to Kifua Arba Bnei Adam Arba. So here we're talking about is why the rabbis say that he has no claim, because there are 4 different people who brought the property, who have the fields around the property, and so therefore each one of these people can push him off and say we're not the ones who make the we're not the ones who have to give you the easement. It's the other person. We're not the ones who have to give you the easement. So therefore, it's Arba Bnei Adam Arba Ruchos. Well, if that's the case, Yachim my time at the Admon. So if that's the case, if each one can push off the other person, why is Admon able to say that they have to give him an easement? So V'amar Rava therefore explained, if there are 4 people who originally got the property from 4 other people, then everybody would agree, even Amon would agree that there's no claim against them. Or also 4 people bought it from one person. These 4 people also can say you have no claim against us. The Matzu Mitchile. They could push him up and say you have no claim against us. Kipuigi, where are they arguing? They're only arguing in a case where 4 people come from one person. So where are they arguing? They're only arguing about a case where one person bought the property from 4 different people. So right now it's owned by one, all the fields around the estate, but he got it himself from 4 people. Admon says, Matzi Amarway, that he could say to him, nevertheless, Darki Gabech says, for sure my easement is in one of your properties, therefore you have to give it to me. Darki Gabech. Rabbanan Savri, and the rabbis are in the position to Amarway that he could say, Ishatak Shatak. The rabbis say no. He's able to make a claim and say, listen, I don't have to give you anything, because why? Because the guy could say, if you want to be quiet and accept the deal, whatever I make you do. Otherwise, I'm going to return all the contracts to the original owners. And so therefore, since you would have no claim against them, I have the right to give it back to all of them. And so therefore, since you have no claim against them, therefore you're out of luck. So Lema, Rabbi Abba, the Amar Karabana. Maybe Rabbi Abba who says come Dina, he's saying like the rabbis, I mean it's established that it came from 4 different people, so therefore you have no claim against them. Rabbi Yirmiyah, the Amar Ka'admon, and maybe Rabbi Yirmiyah who says that no, we look at it now as though it's one person owning it, maybe he holds like Admon. So Amar Rabbi Abba says no, Ana da Amri Yafiu Ka'admon. Rabbi Abba says I can even be consistent with Admon. Why does Amon say in that case that you have to give him a portion? You have to give him an easement. Because he could argue on the top of 38. He could argue one way or the other. I have one path by you, and so therefore you have to give it to me. But in this case, excuse me. In this case, could he really say he's not coming with a claim of certainty? Both of these cases, maybe I'm your brother, or maybe I'm your father, or maybe I'm your uncle's son. But in both cases, he doesn't have a certain claim. Rabbi Yirmiyah, whereas Rabbi Yirmiyah would say, Ana da Amri Afil Rabbana. Rabbi Yirmiyah who says other Dina, and in the case of the brothers, he says that the brothers have to give him half of the father's estate. So he says, I could even say like the Rabbanan who say that they don't have to give him anything. Why? Why the rabbis say there he doesn't have to give him anything? Because he said, I could always return the contract to its original owner, and you wouldn't be able to say anything. But in this case, you can't return it to the original owner. He wouldn't be able to do it. This is a case of making a claim for the father's estate. It's not the same situation, so he wouldn't be able to do it. So then the Gemara says, Safek v'yavam shabo lachok b'nichne saba. In the next case, let's say there's a Safek and the yavam, so the Safek and this person who may be his father or maybe his uncle, they're coming to divide up the estates of the Saba, of the grandfather. So Safek Amar Hai Gavra Bar Misnahu Upalga Didiu. So the suffix says, look, I'm the son of the deceased, and so therefore I have half the estate like you. My father was your brother. We both inherit the grandfather. Whereas the Yavam Amar At Barai Didi At V'Leislach Lamidi. Whereas the Yavam says, you're my son, and therefore you have nothing in the estate. You won't get anything. Have a Yavam Vadai, the suffix. So the Yavam certainly has a claim, and the suffix maybe has a claim. So the Yavam Vadai is suffix. So therefore, under those circumstances, they ain't suffix motivide vadai. You say an uncertain claim does not uproot a certain claim, so therefore the suffix gets nothing. Well, what about this case? Suffix b'nei yavam. So now what's the scenario is that the suffix and the b'nei yavam shabao lachok, that they are coming lachok b'nechsei saba. The suffix and the b'nei yavam are coming to divide up the estate of the saba. So of the grandfather. Safek Amar. So what's the scenario? The Safek and the Bnei Yavam are coming to divide up the estate of the grandfather. Safek Amar. The Safek says, "Who got Bar Misna?" He said, "I'm the son of the deceased. Therefore, I get the estate. Palgadiyu, I get half the estate." Whereas Bnei Yavam Amri Achunat. They say, "You're a brother. Umanta Islach Bar." All you with us is a portion, just get the same portion like us. So now, how do we divide it? So Rashi says what we're referring to here is a scenario with 6 gold coins and the total of 3 people making 2 certain brothers and the suffix. So what do we do? So in this case, we say, Palga the Kamodi, he admits that he has no claim. The suffix says, I have no claim to have. So shockley. So the brothers take those 3 gold coins and they divide amongst themselves, 1.5 gold coins for each. Tilta the Kamodule, they admit to him that he gets 1/3 of the estate because he's a suffix. He's at least their brother, so they're going to give him at least 2 gold coins. That he takes that. Bashlu Danka, so they taking 3, he's taking 2, but there's 1 gold coin left. There's a 6 left. Bashlu Danka, Ave Maman Amutoba suffix. So that 6 gold coin, they're dividing it. So they divide it between their half and his half. So he gets half of that gold coin, so he ends up with 2.5, and they get half. So they have a total of 3.5 divided amongst 2 people. So that's how we divide that case. Saba v'yava. So let's say what the Saba v'yava. What's the next case? The case is the grandfather and the Yavam are coming to divide up the estates b'nechsei suffix, the suffix estate. O Saba v'suffix b'nechsei Yavam, or the Saba and the suffix are coming to divide up the estate of the Yavam. So both cases have a mamon amuto b'suffix v'cholkin. Since they both have a suffix claim, therefore we're going to divide it. Because in the case of the Saba and the Yavam and Nefse suffix, the Yavam's claim is I'm the father, and the Saba says I'm the grandfather. So therefore, in this case, the Yavam has no other son, Rashi says. So Saba suffix b'nichsei Yavam. Let me first read Rashi. Saba v'Yavam b'nichsei suffix. The Saba says you're the son of the first brother to die, and since he has no heir, I come before anybody else, because we say the father inherits the son before anybody else. Whereas the Yavam says you're my son, and I'm inheriting him because the father comes first. Or the Saba and the suffix are in the nichsei of the Yavam, meaning to say the Yavam has no other child, and the Saba says you are the son of the deceased, and I inherit my son before anybody else. And the suffix says I'm his son, and I'm inheriting him. So there, in this case, we divide it because perhaps they're each right. And so we don't say, Rashi says the chiddush here is we don't say that the vadai, we don't say that the father is the one who has the presumptive status. He's what's called the muhsak. We don't say that here. We don't say that under these scenario because if the suffix will be a son, then the father will not get anything. So therefore, it's not a case of suffix versus vada. It's both are in all-in situations, and so therefore they get nothing. Okay, so now we go on. So now therefore they divide it. So now on to the next Mishnah. The Mishnah states, Shomeres Yavam Shenafala Nechasim. So as a background to this Mishnah, we note that a woman, when she comes into marriage, she can designate her property however she wants it. And there's two basic types of property that she brings in. One is called Nichsei Tzom Barzel. Nichsei Tzom Barzel is basically, she comes into the marriage, let's say she has a house, and she comes in and she says to the husband, this house is worth $1 million. The husband promises on the termination of the marriage to return to her $1 million, but he basically takes control over that property forever now. He's basically buying it at the price that was fixed at that time they entered into the marriage. That's one type of property. That's called sheep and iron property. He has to make good to her on the value of that property when they're concluding. Whereas the other type of property is what's called nirse malug, which is plucking's property, meaning to say that she enters into the marriage with, let's say, an apartment building. So she gets to take the apartment building back. The apartment building could go up in value to worth like 20 times more than it was when she entered in. But in the meantime, he gets to collect the rents. He gets the fruits of the apartment building while they're married. So Shomeres Yavam. So let's say a woman falls into Yibam, and she falls to Yibam. So she's waiting to do Yibam with the brother, let's say with Shimon. Shenafula Nechasim. But while she's waiting to do Yibam, she inherits a property. So Modim, Beis Shammai, Beis Hillel. So Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel both agree under these scenarios. They both agree that Shemocheres Onosenes V'Kayim. That under these circumstances, meaning to say that it's her property, she can do whatever she wants with it. Mesa, but if she would die, Maya Sepik Suva. So what would happen to her ksuva if she would die? The ksuva is a bond, it's a mortgage. All the husband's property is mortgaged to pay off this amount that he had promised to the wife in the case where he should predecease her or divorce her. But let's say she dies, what happens to her ksuva or to the estate that's nechasim v'yotzinima? What happens to her nichsei mulug? So there, that meaning to say the mulug property, Beis Shammai says yachoku yorshei ba'am yorshei av. Beis Shammai says the two estates who have claims to it, her family's estate and his family's estate, they split it. And Beis Hillel says nechasim b'cheskasan ksuva b'cheskas yorshei abal, and nachnasim machnochsim v'yotzinima b'cheskas yorshei av. He said no, the two estates they maintain the status quo, whatever was in their possession. So the ksuba stays with the husband's family, and the nichsei malug, the property where the husband gets the dividends only, that stays with the wife. Kansa, once, let's say he would actually marry her, then Harei Kishto called her, then she's completely like his wife. As long as her ksuva, the ksuva is paid for by the estate of the first husband. We'll see what that means in the Gemara eventually. But for now, first, the Gemara asks the question, why in the first clause of the Mishnah, where it's a Shomeres Yavam, who inherited property, does Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel both say that under those circumstances it's completely hers? Whereas in the concluding clause where she dies, Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel both say that they argue. Beis Shammai says they split it, and Beis Hillel says everything stays with the presumptive status. Why in the first clause do they not argue? Why in the latter clause do they argue? So Amar Ula Reisha Denafa Kashiyarusa. So in the first clause, Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel both agree that it's all hers is because when she fell to Yibam, in the first case, she wasn't fully married to her husband. There was two stages of marriage: as an arusa, betrothal, and nisuin, in a full wedding. She was only in the status of an arusa, and so therefore, since she was only in status in arusa, since she was now one less, it's even more attenuated because she just has a zika to this new husband. She just connected to him, but she's not even betrothed to him. She was betrothed to his brother. Therefore, he doesn't get to inherit her. But in the concluding clause, she was already fully married to the Yevam's brother, and so therefore, since she was already fully married, the zika is effective for the husband to make a claim, at least on the property that was in its presumptive state. He gets to keep it, according to Beis Hillel, and Beis Shammai says enough of a claim to split it. So we see from here, kasavar ula zika sarusa osa safik harusa. So we see from here, it says ula. So the ula must be in the position that, since this is how ula is interpreting the Gemara, that in the first clause where Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel both agree that the woman gets to keep everything is because she's not in arusa. If she would be in arusa, there would be an argument over who gets the property, but she's what's called now a safek arusa, because all she has is zika, so it's just a uncertain arusa. So ula must be in the position that zika arusa osa safek arusa. That if she has just a zika as an arusa, then it makes her one step lower, which is like as a safek arusa. We're on top of 38b, and zika is nesua, and if she would have a zika as a nesua, that would make her a safek nesua. That would also lower the claims against her, make her just a safek nesua. What does this mean? Zikas arusa osa safek arusa. We're on top of 38b. What do we mean when we say that zikas arusa makes her a safek arusa? The isa kadaitach vade arusa, because if you would look at her as though she was certainly a betrothed woman, then modem Beis Hillel would admit shemocheres v'nosenes v'kayim. Then Beis Hillel would admit that under those circumstances, Beis Hillel would admit that she could sell and it would be a valid sale. But would Beis Hillel really admit that under those circumstances? If she was really a certain arusa, Beis Hillel wouldn't allow her lichatchila even initially to sell and to sell all the property. Vatanan, didn't we learn in the Mishnah in Ksubos? So let's say she had property. She inherited property from when she was engaged. Beis Shammai says timkor, Beis Hillel timkor. Beis Hillel says that if she's a full arusa, she's not allowed to sell the property initially. But if she sold it, will be valid. So therefore, the first clause of our Mishnah, where she inherits property and she sells it, and it's okay, she's allowed to sell it. Can't be Beis Hillel. So it must mean Shema Mina Zika Arusa, that since she just has a Zika as an arusa, that osa safek arusa. That makes her an uncertain arusa. Whereas Zika's nesuin, osa safek nesua. And also we have to say, ula must be of the position that if you have a Zika from a woman who was nesuin, that makes her a safek nesua. That makes her an uncertain nesua. Why? The isal kadaitach vaday nesua. Because if you want to say she was a certain nesua, how can you say Beis Shammai Omer Miyachoku Yorshe Balam Yorshe Ahab? How can you say Beis Shammai says you split it? But we learned that in the Mishnah in Kesuvos, it says Nafu Anachasa Mishani. Says if she was fully married and then she inherited the estate. Elu ve'elu modim shemach ravanasna shabal motzi bi'adal kuchos. Even Beis Shammai, both Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel agree that she's not allowed to sell it, and if she did sell it, the husband could take it back. So we see from here, Zikas Nesua. So from the fact that here Beis Shammai says that they split it, and Beis Hillel says everything retains its presumptive status, it must be that they say that the Zikas of a Nesua makes her a safek Nesua. So that's what Ula's position is. So Rabba Chan is that Amay Rabba, if that's the case, if we're just arguing about what's the status of a Zika of an Arus or a Nesua, well, why do we have to bring in this hiccup that she dies? Why do we have to talk about the property itself and after she dies? If the whole question is about Zika of an Arus or an Asua, why don't we say the following? We'll argue while she's alive. Uba Peiros, and argue about the dividends. Why don't we just argue about that? Why do we have to say that it's after she dies? So Elam Rabba Idi v'Idi Dinafa Kashina Sua. Rabba says both cases of our Mishnah refer to a case where she inherited it and she had been fully married to the deceased. She had been fully married. V'zikas Nesua Ose Safek Nesua. And everybody would say that the Zika of a Nesua makes her an uncertain Nesua. But Reisha the Ikaima in the first case, so she's still alive. So Havela Ihi Vadai Inu Suffolk. So she certainly has it, and it's uncertain if they have it because she's in a Arusa, Suffolk Arusa, and they're only a Suffolk, and so therefore, since it's hers, and they're only a Suffolk claim to it, so therefore, under those circumstances, she gets everything. Vein Suffolk Motzi Midei Vadai. Because she always gets the principal in that case. And so therefore they are only Suffolk because they only have a doubt. And so therefore in the ratio where she's alive, and so therefore she certainly has the principal, she's a Vada and they're only a Suffolk, she gets to keep the property because they're a Suffolk, they can't take it out of the property. But the Seifa, but in the concluding clause, the Mesa, now she's dead. They're both Suffolk claims. And so therefore, they both want to inherit her. So therefore, they split it. So Abaye is saying, you're saying, well, Beis Shammai ain't Suffolk Motzi Midei Vadai. You're saying that according to Beis Shammai, that in the first case, because she certainly she certainly has the estate because she has the principal, and they have a Suffolk claim because then maybe she's in Nesua. That Beis Shammai says the Suffolk cannot take it out of the Vadai. So Abai says, does Beis Shammai really say that? But didn't we learn Vatanan Nafal Abai Salav? Okay, you know what? We'll stop here. Pick this up, God willing. Pick this up, God willing, tomorrow morning. All right, we'll stop here. Anybody have any questions? I'm happy to address them.